Welcome to the C.S. Lewis Mastery Channel. I invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Now, remember that day when everything changed. That phone call that broke your heart. The letter that shattered your dreams. The exact moment you realized that the thing you valued most was simply gone. We've all been there. I've been there. That pain in your chest. The endless sleepless nights. The questions that echo in your mind like a never-ending nightmare. How will I move forward? Will this pain ever end? If you feel like you're walking alone through a dark valley of loss, I need you to know something. You are not alone. God sees your pain. God feels your pain. But most of all, God is moving heaven and earth to restore what you've lost. The same God who gave back double what Job lost. The same God who turned David's exile into a testament to glory. The same God who took Paul out of prison to fulfill a much greater purpose. This God is writing your story right now. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains." If the pain you are experiencing seems unbearable, know that it has God's full attention. Your loss may be a divine wake-up call, preparing you for a restoration beyond anything you can imagine. Today, I want to share with you 7 biblical signs that God is about to restore all that you have lost. And I'm not talking about just fancy words or false hopes. These promises are rooted in the Bible and demonstrated throughout history in the lives of those who have trusted Him. When God begins a process of restoration, He is always sending us signs. Divine markers that point to the coming renewal. And if you are experiencing any of these 7 signs, take heart. Your season of restoration may be closer than you think. Let's discover together what God's Word reveals about this journey. From loss to restoration. By the time you finish watching, you will have concrete tools to recognize these signs in your own life and the strength to persevere until your restoration comes. There are times when pain seems to be all that is left. You wake up and it is there. You fall asleep and it still lingers. The hours drag by and, no matter how much the world moves on, your soul seems trapped in the moment of loss. But what if I told you that your pain is not the end of the story? That there is something happening behind the scenes of your life that is beyond your comprehension? Imagine yourself in a violent storm, where the sky suddenly darkens and the winds threaten to uproot everything you know. But then, for a brief moment, a ray of sunlight breaks through the clouds. It does not dissolve the storm immediately, but it is a sign that the light still exists, that there is hope. In the same way, there are signs that God is about to restore what has been lost. And the first of these signs is the inexplicable peace in the midst of chaos. This peace is not an absence of suffering, nor is it a self-made emotion. It is something that comes over you when logic tells you that you should be falling apart. When Jesus said in John 14 verse 27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you," he was talking about something supernatural. Not the peace of the world, which depends on favorable circumstances, but a divine peace that settles within you even when everything around you is falling apart. Think of Paul and Silas, chained in a cold, damp cell. They had been unjustly beaten, bruised, and imprisoned, with no prospect of freedom. One would expect them to be desperate, questioning God, feeling abandoned. But instead, midnight came and they were singing. Singing! Imagine that. In the midst of pain and injustice, they found something the world could not understand, a peace that transcended the cell and the chains. Perhaps right now, you feel trapped in an invisible cell. The chains of pain, loss, and fear for the future are too heavy. You wonder if this situation will ever change. But if, in the midst of all this, you've begun to notice moments of calm that don't make sense, a peace that doesn't come from outside, but from within, that could be a sign that God is already moving the pieces of your restoration. This peace doesn't mean the storm is over, but that God's presence is with you in it. And when He's present, the storm no longer has the same power over you. This is the first sign that something bigger is about to happen. When God restores, He doesn't just return what was lost. He multiplies, He transforms, He brings new purpose that you could never have imagined. And if you're feeling this peace, even for brief moments, it's not your mind trying to be positive. It's God whispering to your heart, "I'm here. I'm working. I'm restoring." The second sign of coming restoration is the rediscovery of joy in the small blessings of everyday life. When we suffer significant loss, it often colors our entire perspective. The world becomes gray, colorless, and we struggle to find joy in anything. But when God begins His work of restoration, one of the first things He usually does is awaken our capacity to feel joy again. You may not see everything clearly yet, but if something is beginning to move within you, if a glimmer of hope is being born, then know that your restoration has already begun. Because when God decides to bring something back to life, nothing can stay His hand. The prophet Joel knew this intimately. He was speaking to people who literally watched as swarms of locusts devoured everything: their crops, their livelihood, their future. Can you imagine standing in those barren fields, once lush with promise, now completely denuded? Yet to these devastated people, Joel declared, "The Lord your God will give you autumn and spring rains, as before. Your threshing floors will be full of grain, your vats will overflow with new wine and olive oil." Joel 2 verses 23 to 24. Note carefully what came first, not the instant abundance, but the rain. The simple joy of water on parched ground. The promise in every drop that life would grow again. When you start to notice the beauty of a sunset again, when the laughter of children brings a smile to your face, when a cup of coffee in the morning feels like a gift instead of just routine. These moments are not trivial, they are divine signs. C.S. Lewis recognized this when he wrote, "Joy is the serious business of heaven." Are the simple pleasures of life becoming meaningful to you again after a season of dormancy? Take heart. God is at work, and restoration may be just around the corner. The third sign that God is preparing to restore what you have lost is the unexpected appearance of divine connections. These are relationships that seem to come out of nowhere. People with exactly the right word, the right skill, or the right opportunity that you need for your journey of restoration. These connections are not coincidences, they are divine appointments. Consider the story of Ruth. This young woman lost everything. Her husband died, her future was destroyed. Following her mother-in-law to a foreign land where she was a despised foreigner as a Moabite. Can you feel the weight of her grief as she walked into those fields to glean the remaining grain? And then comes this seemingly small detail in Ruth 2 verse 3, "And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz." That word "happened" doesn't mean it was a coincidence. It was God moving unseen pieces on the board, orchestrating a divine appointment that would not only restore what Ruth had lost, but give her a place in the lineage of Christ Himself. When you are living faithfully despite your loss, God will often bring people into your life who will play crucial roles in your restoration. Pay attention to the new people who come into your life, especially those who encourage your faith or who have expertise in areas related to your loss. Notice the rekindled connections with people from your past that suddenly reappear. Are you experiencing an influx of new, meaningful connections? God may be assembling the team that will help rebuild what you've lost. The fourth sign that God is about to restore what you've lost is a renewed ability to dream about the future. After a significant loss, our vision often narrows. We focus on surviving today because tomorrow seems too painful to contemplate. But when God plants new dreams in your heart, it's often His way of preparing you for what He plans to do. Daniel's story is deeply moving. He was thrown into a den of lions for his faithfulness. He had lost his homeland, his freedom, and nearly his life. But even in that dark pit, surrounded by wild beasts, something remarkable was happening. Daniel never stopped believing that God's initial vision of kingdoms arising was not just a prediction, it was a lifeline he clung to during his darkest nights. I wonder about the times when he questioned everything, when doubt about the promise crept in like the Babylonian night. But he held on. And in one day, just one day, he went from condemned to celebrated. Not only was his life restored, but he was given greater honor, purpose, and influence in a foreign land. What visions has God placed in your heart that seem impossible now? C.S. Lewis wrote, "You are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream." When God is preparing to restore what you have lost, He often plants new dreams in your heart, sometimes dreams even bigger than you had ever dreamed. These are not just positive thoughts, they are divine previews of the restoration to come. If you find yourself thinking about the future with hope instead of fear, if you are making plans again, setting goals, or envisioning possibilities that you could not see before, these are powerful indicators. God does not restore us to make us stand still. He restores us for a purpose. Your renewed ability to dream is often a sign that God's restoration is already beginning in your mind and heart, and will soon manifest in your circumstances. I would love to hear which of these signs you are already seeing in your life. Let me know in the comments which of these first 4 signs you recognize, or which one touched you most deeply. And if you're eager to learn about the other 3 signs, keep watching, they're even more powerful. The 5th sign of restoration is supernatural provision that arrives just when you need it. These provisions may seem small compared to what you have lost, but they are significant because they demonstrate God's awareness of your needs and His commitment to meeting them. These provisions are like the first drops of rain after a long drought, evidence that the downpour is coming. The mighty prophet Elijah, who called down fire from heaven, also knew crushing discouragement. During a devastating famine, with a death sentence hanging over his head, God sent ravens, filthy birds, to bring him food. He later lived with a widow until his last meal. Every day she reached into that jar of flour, expecting to find it empty. And every day he discovered it with enough for one more day. Just enough. Never too much, never too little. Have you ever experienced those just enough moments? The unexpected cash that covers exactly what you need. The friend who calls just when your strength fails. The door that opens just before the last one closes. These are not cosmic coincidences. They are love notes from your Father, signaling that a greater provision is on the way. C.S. Lewis observed, "Miracles are a retelling, in small print, of the same story that is written all over the world in letters too large for some of us to see. The small provisions showing up in your life, the discount that saves you money, the gift that meets a need, these are miracles in small print that point to God's larger story of restoration for your life. If you are noticing these provisions at just the right time, document them. Keep a record of how God is meeting your needs in ways that seem too timely to be coincidental. These are not just isolated incidents. They are part of a pattern of provision that often precedes full restoration. Your supernatural provision today is building your faith for the greater restoration God has planned for tomorrow. The 6th sign that God is about to restore what you have lost is a growing sense of meaning in your suffering. When we are first struck with loss, it often seems senseless and cruel. But as God prepares us for restoration, He often gives us glimpses of how our pain is being redeemed for a purpose. How our darkest chapters are becoming part of a beautiful redemptive story. We see the example in Peter's restoration after his devastating failure. Imagine the man who swore he would die with Jesus, who drew a sword to defend him, and ended up denying him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Can you imagine the shame, the self-loathing, the certainty that his calling was over? But in John 21 we find Jesus preparing breakfast on the beach, asking Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" For each denial, Jesus offered restoration, "Feed my sheep." Can you imagine that moment? To come face to face with the one you betrayed and receive not condemnation but commission? This is not human nature. This is supernatural restoration, the moment when the fragments of failure suddenly form a picture of purpose so beautiful it takes your breath away. The very failure that seemed final becomes the foundation for greater ministry. If you are beginning to understand your suffering in a new light, if you are seeing how God can use your story to help others, if you are discovering strength and wisdom you never had before, these revelations are part of restoration. Sometimes understanding the why behind our losses is itself a form of restoration, and often precedes the physical restoration of what was lost. The final and most significant sign that God is about to restore what you have lost is a deepening of your relationship with Him. Loss often brings us to our knees, but there is a difference between crying out to God in despair and experiencing genuine spiritual renewal. This renewed hunger for God's presence and His Word is the clearest sign that restoration is near. David's words from his darkest season exemplify this well. Picture him, the anointed king, now a desert fugitive, sleeping in caves, hunted like an animal by his own father-in-law. In Psalm 63, he writes of that desert he experienced, "O God, you are my God, earnestly do I seek you. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh longs for you, in a dry and weary land where there is no water." Do you hear what's happening? The man who had everything and lost it all is not begging for his throne back. He's not asking for revenge. He's saying, "God, in losing everything, what I discovered was that you are what I really need. I've been in that desert." Maybe you're there now, that place where everything is stripped away, and in the absence of all comfort, you discover a hunger for God so intense it feels physical. C.S. Lewis understood this spiritual awakening that often follows suffering when he wrote, "Pain removes the veil, it plants the banner of truth within the stronghold of a rebellious soul." The same losses that once threatened to destroy your faith can become the catalyst for a deeper, more authentic relationship with God than you've ever experienced before. If you find yourself hungering for Scripture, if prayer has become less of a duty and more of a delight, if you sense God's presence in ways you didn't before, these spiritual stirrings are significant. The greatest restoration God offers is not the return of things, but the deepening of your relationship with Him. And often, this spiritual restoration precedes and paves the way for the restoration of everything else that was lost. Before we part ways today, let me say something I know to be true. The God we serve is obsessed with restoration. It's not just something He does, it's who He is. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible tells a story with 1,000 variations. Loss, followed by divine preparation, followed by restoration so complete it leaves us speechless. Your story of loss is not over yet. The final chapters are still being written, and I promise they are beyond anything you can imagine. C.S. Lewis wrote, "God intends to give us what we need, not what we now think we want." Your restoration may not be exactly what you imagine. It may be different and infinitely better than you can imagine. As Isaiah 61 verse 7 promises, "Instead of your shame you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours." If you are experiencing these 7 signs, supernatural peace, renewed joy, divine connections, fresh dreams, unexpected provision, meaning in your suffering, and spiritual hunger, take heart. These are not just random experiences. They are markers of a dividing line on the path to restoration. God won't just restore what you lost. He'll give you more than you had before. I know this journey seems impossibly long. The nights are dark. The questions are heavy. The pain is real. But please hear me, you're not walking this road alone. The God who turns graves into gardens, mourning into dance, and ashes into beauty is carrying you when your strength fails. He collects your tears in a bottle. He hears the prayers you can't even put into words. Hold on tight. Just as winter always yields to spring, your season of loss will give way to restoration. And when that day comes, when you stand in the fullness of what God has restored, you will look back on this valley and understand why C.S. Lewis wrote that there are far better things ahead than anything we have left behind. Your restoration is coming, and I promise it will be worth every tear. If this video brought hope to your heart today, don't keep this message to yourself. Like this video and share it with someone who is going through a valley of loss right now. Subscribe to the channel for more content that will strengthen your faith and fuel your hope. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming videos. And leave in the comments which of the 7 signs you are experiencing in your life right now. I look forward to praying specifically for you and your journey of restoration. Until we meet again, remember, your story doesn't end with loss, it ends with divine restoration.